The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and curated perfection. Guests in silken velvet sipped champagne under a ceiling painted to look like the Parisian sky. In the center, on a grand staircase, wrapped in roses and gold, Rami J stood in a designer tuxedo, holding a velvet box. Gasps rose from the crowd as he knelt before Zoya Malik, his new fiancée. Zoya, draped in a body-hugging gown the color of garnet, placed a hand on her chest as if surprised, though she had rehearsed this moment in the mirror a dozen times. Inside the box lay a diamond ring so large, it almost mocked subtlety. A glimmering oval-cut stone nestled in platinum, framed by twin halo bands. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks as she extended her finger, and Ramiz slipped the ring on with a grin that said, "Look what I can afford," reporters murmured. "See you, Jumi's Shayes, fairy tale engagement." Zoya Malik's ring, estimated at 3.2 million. "Where's the ex-wife?" one whispered. "Still hiding." But halfway across the world, on a private runway in the Swiss Alps, Meher Khan wasn't hiding. She stepped into a sleek black jet under a soft snowfall, her coat belted tightly around her waist, heels clicking on the steps. No entourage, no photographers, just her. And Danish Aftab, the elusive billionaire, known for avoiding cameras more than most men chase them. He greeted her at the jet door with a quiet nod and a hand, extended in quiet partnership. She took it without hesitation. As the jet lifted into the clouds, silence followed. No announcements, no press releases. Just purpose, camera flash, on Zoya's ring. Jet door closes behind Meher. Voiceover. He thought I'd be watching him shine. But I was already flying. 5 years ago, their wedding was the event of the season. Meher Khan and Ramesh Shah, the golden couple. The heiress with a master's in international business and the self-made tech entrepreneur turned billionaire. Their union was splashed across glossy magazine covers. Love meets legacy. Power couple goals. The new royals of Karachi. The photos showed perfection. Her couture like his custom Shawani. The candlelit palace venue in Istanbul. Guests flew in on chartered flights. Hashtags trended for days. To the world. They were unstoppable. Behind the smiles, though, the cracks had already begun to form. In the early days, Meher truly believed they were partners. She sat in on pitch meetings, helped rebrand his flagship company, and handled international investor relations like a pro. At night, they toasted to their wins with wine and laughter. He made her feel like she belonged beside him, not behind him. But slowly, that changed. It started with small corrections. "Don't interrupt me in meetings." Then, subtle digs. "That dress isn't great for your figure. Zoya wears this brand better." Then came exclusion. She'd find out about laundry she wasn't invited to, deals signed without her knowledge. Whenever she questioned him, Ramiz would turn the tables masterfully. "You're being paranoid. You read too much into things. Can't you just support me without needing credit?" Gaslighting, wrapped in affection, guilt laced with charm. Meher began second-guessing herself, her instincts, her decisions, even her own worth. She tried harder, dressing sharper, speaking less, smiling more. But her spark, the brilliance that once drew rooms toward her, began to dim. And then came Zoya, introduced as a PR genius, hired to revamp the company's public image. Zoya Malik was everything Ramiz seemed to admire. Bold, stylish, media savvy. She moved like a woman who knew men turned to watch her leave a room. Her eyes lingered too long on Rames's face in meetings. Her laughter was just a little too loud when he spoke. At first, Meher didn't mind. She believed in professionalism. She believed in boundaries. Until she found the messages. Late one night, Rames's phone buzzed while he was in the shower. Meher never checked his phone before, but something, a gut feeling, a chill in her spine, made her pick it up. There, they were flirty voice notes, inside jokes, a late-night selfie of Zoya in Rames's office chair, barefoot, lips pursed. And one message that shattered everything. "Does she even know you've already chosen me?" Meher confronted Ramiz the same night, heart pounding, hands shaking. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply asked, Is there something you want to tell me? He didn't deny it. Instead, he shrugged. You're too sensitive. It's not what it looks like. And even if it was, it's none of your business anymore. That was the night something inside Meher broke. The divorce came swiftly, brutally, and publicly. Ramiz made sure of that. He leaked the separation to the press before Meher could even tell her parents. Tabloids spun wild stories. Khan, emotionally unstable. Was Zoya the reason or the solution? Inside the cold split of the society sweethearts, Ramiz's PR machine, powered by none other than Zoya, painted him as a heartbroken husband who tried everything, and Meher as the frigid, entitled woman who couldn't handle his success. Her friends chose sides. Most chose his. She signed the papers. Alone. No alimony. No statements. Just silence. But silence wasn't surrender. Meher moved out of their shared home, the marble fortress she had helped design, with only her essentials and her dignity intact. She went off the radar. Deleted social media. Changed her number. Refused interviews. She disappeared so completely that even the gossip blogs stopped trying. Behind that silence, though, she began to rebuild. Not in public. In private, she returned to herself, piece by painful piece, studying again. Consulting for women-led startups. Therapy, fitness, meditation, long walks, cold tears, quiet rage. And in time, quiet power. Because while Ramiz paraded Zoya like a trophy and soaked in the applause of high society, Meher learning one of life's cruelest and most valuable truths. Sometimes, the people who sparkle the brightest in public are the ones who dull you in private. But diamonds, she realized, are not made for display. They're made under pressure. And one day, they cut. Meher Khan had never liked silence before. Now, it was all she craved. After the divorce, she fled the noise, the cameras, the stares, the cruel smiles, disguised as sympathy. Murray, with its winding roads, cedar-scented air, and slow fog, welcomed her like an old friend. No paparazzi here, no social climbers. Just space, to breathe, to break, to begin. Her cousin Nita lived in a modest hill house overlooking the Pine Valley, a cozy, sun-warmed space filled with books and the smell of cardamom tea. Nita asked no questions. She just handed Meher a key, a blanket, and a room with thick curtains. You don't have to explain, she'd said, holding her gently. Just heal, and so Meher did, in bits. The first few weeks were hollow. Sleep came in fragments. Some nights, the flashbacks gripped her chest like a fist, Ramiz's voice echoing through her mind. You're lucky I tolerate you. Maybe if you smiled more. She'd jolt awake in a sweat, chest heaving, her heartbeat a war drum. Nita gently nudged her T-ward therapy. The sessions were raw, like peeling a wound clean. But Meher kept going. It was the only time she spoke about it all. The manipulation, the slow erasure. The betrayal she hadn't yet forgiven herself for allowing. You weren't weak, the therapist had said once, gently. You were surviving. Journaling became her lifeline. Each morning, pen in hand, she poured her insides out in ink, the rage, the grief, the numbness, the brief flickers of clarity. One entry stood out weeks later. He broke me, but I'm still breathing. That must count for something. The media tried to pull her back into the storm. Tabloids called former friends, the ones who had stood beside Ramiz at parties but hadn't messaged her once during the chaos, suddenly wanted to check in. She declined every call, blocked every number. She wasn't interested in returning to that world. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Instead, she built a small routine. Morning walks, quiet afternoons reading on the porch, evening tea with Nita, who often shared office gossip to distract her. The world still spun, investors still schemed, brands still launched. But Meher no longer felt pressure to chase it. She was learning to exist without being anyone's accessory. And then, one quiet evening, it happened. Meha had taken a detour from her usual path, letting her feet wander along a less forest trail behind the old rest house. Mist clung to the edges of pine trees. A hawk cried overhead. She inhaled deeply, thankful for the solitude, until she bumped into a stranger rounding the curve. Books and paper scattered between them. "Oh God, I'm so sorry." She bent down, flustered. "It's all right," the man replied calmly, crouching to help. They both looked up and paused. Meher blinked. She knew that face. The sharp jaw, intense eyes, and quiet restraint. He wasn't a celebrity in the traditional sense, but his face had appeared on tech covers, in whispered conversations. Danish Aftab. The elusive billionaire whose AI security firm had silently revolutionized global defense systems. The man who never gave interviews, who once walked out of $1 million summit because a reporter invaded his privacy, and now he was here in a hoodie, holding her notebook. He handed it to her wordlessly. She took it, stunned. "You live here?" she asked, almost stupidly. Mouth twitched slightly. Sometimes, a long silence. Then, to her own surprise, she smiled. And, to her greater surprise, so did he. The thing about Danish Aftab was, he never asked unnecessary questions. He didn't probe, he didn't pry. In a world obsessed with details and digging, his restraint was a rare kind of respect. After their accidental meeting on the trail, Meher thought that would be it. A polite encounter, a quiet smile. But 2 days later, a discreet black SUV pulled up to Nida's driveway. A staff member, courteous and soft-spoken, handed her an envelope. Inside it, a handwritten note in clean, minimalist script. "I believe in purposeful silence, but I also believe in rebuilding with dignity. Would you consider meeting me for tea?" Dia Meher blinked, then, slowly, smiled. They met at a discreet chalet, tucked deep within the hills. No cameras, no staff hovering, just a stone fireplace, a pot of Kashmiri chai, and wide glass windows that framed the evergreens. Danish was already there when she arrived, reading a weathered copy of The Prophets by Khalil Gibran. He stood when she entered, offered a simple greeting. No mention of her past, no lingering looks, just respect steady and unspoken. Their conversation was quiet, yet alive. They talked about the valley, about books, about the absurdity of media headlines. When silence crept in, it wasn't awkward, it was restful. Meher realized she hadn't felt that kind of calm around anyone in years. As they poured their second cup of tea, Danish finally spoke about something closer to the chest. "I'm building something," he said, carefully. "Not a company, something better. A foundation for women's mental health. Safe spaces, education, therapy access, confidential support systems." Meher listened intently, surprised by the depth and simplicity in his words. "I've been looking for someone to lead the strategy," he added. "Someone who understands both worlds, business and survival. Someone with authenticity." He looked directly at her. "I think it might be you." Meher froze. "Me?" He nodded. "You're not a victim. You're a woman who's walked through fire and decided to keep walking." Her instinct was to retreat. "I'm not ready for public life," she said softly. "It's not public," he replied. "It's purposeful, and it's yours to shape." She took a deep breath. Then another. "I'll think about it." He smiled. "That's all I ask." It took her a week to say yes. Not because she doubted his sincerity, but because she doubted herself. Could she step into something new without fear clawing at her? Could she work with a man who didn't want to own or fix her? Nida encouraged her. "You don't have to be ready," she said. "You just have to begin." So Meher began. She started slowly consulting from home, reviewing proposals, drafting outlines, but soon she was joining Danish's team on small trips to Lahore, then Karachi, meeting coordinators, visiting shelter homes, talking to therapists, women, activists. And with every interaction, a piece of her returned. She remembered how to present with clarity, how to negotiate firmly, how to ask the right questions, not as someone's wife or someone's ex, but as a woman who had reclaimed her mind. Word spread in quiet circles. Mahar Khan is consulting with Danish Aftab's initiative. Some blogs speculated. A few online vultures dug up her past. But Mahar didn't flinch. Because this time, the visibility wasn't stolen from her. It was something she chose. She still wore no makeup, still avoided press, but now, when she spoke at small gatherings or boardroom meetings, people listened. Her voice had weight again. Not because it was loud, but because it came from truth. And Danish, he never hovered. He never questioned her pace, never assumed authority. Sometimes, they rode in silence between meetings, looking out at different landscapes. At other times, they'd share a soft laugh over terrible hotel coffee, or argued gently over phrasing in campaign slogans. A quiet, mutual respect formed between them, like two souls with matching bruises, content not to bleed on each other, and still neither asked about the past. But Meher knew, without doubt, that Danish had his own ghosts. She didn't need to hear their names. She could feel their silence. The first time, Mahar stepped on a stage after years of silence. Her hands trembled. Not from fear, from power. It was a small mental health summit in Lahore Intimate, under-publicized, and attended mostly by therapists, researchers, and survivors. She stood behind the podium, dressed in a simple ivory kurta, holding nothing but a few index cards. "My name is Mahar Khan," she began, "and for a long time, I believed I was the problem. There was no dramatic music. No rehearsed tears. Just truth, raw and steady." She spoke about invisible cages, about how easy it was to shrink when love became a leash. She spoke of self-doubt, disguised as care, and silence worn like armor. She didn't name her mace. She didn't have to. Every woman in the room understood. The applause afterward was soft but genuine. One woman came up to her, crying. "You said what I've never been able to say," she whispered. That night, Meher went home and opened a blank document. She began writing, not as revenge, as release. By the time her book, The Quiet Undoing, hit shelves 6 months later, the whispers had turned into waves. It wasn't a celebrity memoir. It wasn't a scandal tell-all. It was a deeply personal reflection on emotional manipulation, gaslighting, and the slow, systematic breaking of identity that so many women endure behind designer doors. It climbed the charts within weeks. Psychologists recommended it. Universities quoted it. NGOs distributed it in women's shelters. And Mahar, she remained the same. No grand interviews. No paparazzi chosen outfits. No drama. She wore her simplicity, like armor, and let her words do the shining. That Danish watched all of it. From a distance. Sometimes from a row in the back of the audience. Sometimes through reports and recordings. He never offered media support. Never tweeted about her work. Never inserted himself into her rise. And that, perhaps, was the most empowering part. Mahar's growth wasn't owed to anyone's name, or shadow, or platform. She had built it brick by brick with her voice, her pain, and her truth. Meanwhile, in a penthouse across the city, Ramesh Shah was unraveling. At first, he told himself her book wouldn't last. That it was a trend. That she'd fade. But then the articles came. The ex-wife who chose dignity over drama. From divorce headlines to global healing advocate, Meher Khan's journey. Every news cycle that celebrated Meher's resilience was a dagger in Rames's perfectly curated image. He began obsessing over public perception. The woman he thought he'd discarded had risen not in scandal, but in stature. Zoya noticed his mood darkening. "She's not even that relevant," she snapped, once, scrolling through Meher's interview clips. "People love a sad story? It'll pass." But it wasn't passing. Worse, Mahar never mentioned them. Not once. She didn't feed gossip. She didn't retaliate. And that silence, it was deafening. So Zoya pushed. "We should go public," she said. Officially, the engagement! Let's show them we've moved on. Ramiz hesitated, not because he disagreed, but because he feared what would come next. Still, he relented. Zoya planned the announcement down to the last emoji. A carefully edited carousel of their posed smiles, matching outfits, the candle-lit dinner, and finally, the diamond? The caption read, "Second chances deserve bigger diamonds." They hit post and waited for the flood. And yes, the comments poured in. Celebrities, influencers, society elites, all congratulating the power couple. But Zoya noticed something strange. No real traction, no virality.n, no reaction. She wasn't watching. Because at that very moment, halfway across the world, Mahar was walking up the private jet stairs. Her assistant held her speech. Her manager confirmed the schedule. This time, she wasn't running from anything. She was en route to New York, the keynote speaker for the UN Women's Summit on Global Mental Wellness. As the jet door closed behind her, she glanced once at her phone. The engagement post had just come through. She looked at the screen, at the ring, at the hashtag. And then she smiled. Not bitterly. Not with mockery. Just a quiet smile of someone who had outgrown the need to explain her silence. The summit was everything she'd once feared. Spotlights, live feeds, global press. But as she stood on that grand stage, with rows of delegates, diplomats, and survivors from over 80 countries, she wasn't nervous. She was ready. "My name is Mahar Khan," she said, voice clear and strong. And silence doesn't always mean surrender. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's preparation. And sometimes it's the sound before the rise. The room listened, truly listened. And when she finished, the applause was thunderous. Not for a survivor, not for an ex-wife, for a woman who had reclaimed everything. Dubai glittered like a mirage under the desert moon, sleek skyscrapers piercing the clouds, fountains dancing to orchestrated music, and luxury sedans lining the entrance of the Royal Pearl Hotel, where the elite from across the globe gathered for the summit for global innovation and social impact. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with golden chandeliers and crystal glasses. It was an invitation-only event, one that curated its guest list with meticulous precision. CEOs, royalty, impact investors, and thought leaders mingled over canapes and champagne. Among them was Ramiz, his suit tailored, smile rehearsed. Still basking in the afterglow of his viral engagement post with Zoya, he greeted everyone with the swagger of a man convinced he had won. Zoya, draped in emerald silk, matched his energy, clinging to his arm with practiced elegance. But her eyes darted around the room constantly, scanning faces, watching reactions, searching for validation. The host took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's keynote speaker is a woman whose work is reshaping global conversations on emotional health and identity. Please welcome Mahar Khan. There was a beat of silence, the kind that crashes through a room like thunder. Rami stiffened. Zoya's smile faltered. And then, applause. Mahar walked onto the stage in a slate blue evening gown that shimmered softly under the lights. Her hair was pulled back, simple and elegant. No diamonds, no entourage, just her. She didn't flinch when her eyes found Rami's across the room. She didn't look away. She stood with quiet command, her presence larger than the chandelier above her. "Good evening," she began, her voice resonant. "For years, I believed strength meant staying silent, for love, for loyalty, for peace. But true strength is the ability to speak when your silence was once survival." The audience leaned in, captivated. She spoke of digital wellness, the psychological impact of manipulation, and the art of healing without seeking revenge. Her speech wasn't just intelligent, it was transformative. Every word carried the weight of experience, every pause deliberate. Ramiz watched, transfixed. She was not the woman he had left behind. She was not a shadow of his past. She was a force entirely her own. Zoya crossed her arms. She so calculated. But no one else in the room thought so. By the time Mehar concluded with, "We do not rise by erasing others. We rise by remembering who we were before they taught us to shrink," the room erupted in a standing ovation. Cameras flashed. Attendees crowded the aisle to meet her. The very air felt different. Zoya seethed. "We should leave." But Remy had already broken away, heading straight for her. Outside the ballroom, in a private corridor lined with framed art and marble floors, Mehar stood by a water dispenser, sipping quietly. She heard him before she saw him. "You always did know how to put on a show," Ramy said. She turned. "This wasn't a show. It was work." He gave a tight smile. "You've changed." "No, I just came back to myself." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Look, I'm not here to argue. I thought you might be lonely. All this success, but no one by your side." Meher's lips twitched, not with anger, but with quiet pity. Before she could answer, footsteps approached. Danish AFTAB. In a black suit. Calm as ever. His presence radiated quiet authority. He said nothing at first, just stood beside her, his hand brushing hers not possessively, but protectively. Ramiz's eyebrows lifted. "And you are?" Meher glanced at Danish, then back at Ramiz with a soft smile. "Ramiz, this is Danish," she said. "Someone I've come to trust." Then she paused, her eyes unwavering. "And Danish, this is someone I used to know." It was a surgical cut. No malice. No explanation. Just finality. Ramiz opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, he had no script. Danish nodded politely. "Pleasure," then, as if the moment were too small to matter, he gently guided Meher toward the exit. They walked into the night, away from the chandeliers and whispers. Meher exhaled deeply, her hands still warm from Danish's touch. "You didn't have to say anything," she told him. "I know," he replied, "but I was glad to witness it." She looked up at the stars, the same sky she had once stared at in Murray, broken and unsure. But tonight, she wasn't broken. She wasn't unsure. She was walking away from her past, not because it was over, but because she had outgrown it. And in that quiet, moonlit moment, Meher didn't feel triumphant. She felt free. The sun dipped low over the Aegean Sea, painting the horizon in strokes of gold, lavender, and coral. Waves lapped gently at the secluded cove on the lesser-known side of Santorini, where the tourists rarely ventured. No yachts, no crowds, no camera flashes, just the endless rhythm of the ocean and the softness of twilight settling in. Meher walked barefoot along the shoreline, the cool water kissing her feet. A gentle breeze played with the hem of her white linen dress, and for once, the silence around her didn't feel empty, it felt earned. Behind her, Danish followed. At a respectful distance, hands tucked into the pockets of his loose cotton shirt, shoes off, sleeves rolled. He had arranged everything, not a dinner under fairy lights, or a proposal written in roses, but something simpler, more honest. Just time. Just space. Just her. When she finally stopped near a jagged rock formation that split the beach in two, he approached slowly, quietly, like he always did. She turned to him. "This place is beautiful." "You're the only person I've ever brought here," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "You own this beach too?" He smiled. "Only the cliffs?" "The sea refuses to be owned," she chuckled, then grew quiet again. For a moment, neither spoke. And then Danish said, very softly, "I've been thinking." She looked up at him, calm, curious. He didn't kneel. He didn't pull out a box. He simply took her hand, held it between both of his, and said, "I don't want to fix you, Meher. I know you're not broken. I don't want to save you either. I just want to walk beside you if you'll let me." Her breath caught. It wasn't the grandness of the words that moved her. It was their truth. Their restraint, their respect. She stared at their intertwined hands. There had been a time not too long ago when love came with conditions, with control, with expectations dressed as promises. But this was different. I'm not saying yes because I need someone, she said quietly. I'm saying yes because I finally know who I am, and I'd like to share that person with you. He nodded, a slight relief in his eyes, though his expression stayed calm. There were no ring photos, no celebratory champagne, no hashtags to announce the moment. Just two people standing on wet sand, agreeing to walk into the unknown together, not as rescuer and rescued, but as equals. Later, they sat near a driftwood log, watching the stars emerge one by one. Danish reached into his satchel and pulled out something wrapped in silk, not a diamond, but a simple silver band, hand-forged with a small engraving inside. She slid it on without ceremony. I wanted something quiet, he said. Something that wouldn't outshine you. She looked at the silver band against her skin and smiled. Then, it's perfect! A shooting star streaked across the sky. They didn't make wishes. They had already made a choice. A ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and white orchids. Guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos sipped champagne under gilded ceilings, while photographers buzzed like bees around the golden couple of the evening. Ramesh Shah and Zoya, I am Rayan. It was their second engagement party. The first hadn't made the splash. Zoya wanted too few influencers, too little press. This one, however, was curated to perfection. From the imported deserts to the slow-motion confetti drop-timed with Zoya's entrance, everything screamed exclusive. Everything screamed excess. Zoya wore a custom silver gown that clung like a secret, her new diamond ring catching every flash. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes, not since that question outside the venue. Zoya, what do you think of Mehar Khan's new foundation? And worse, is it true she's dating Danish? The Forbes team was seen flying out of Athens. Last week, Zoya's jaw had tightened. She waved off the questions, plastered on her rehearsed smile, and linked arms with Ramesh. Ramesh laughed into the cameras, tone casual but tinged with disdain. Some people chase success, he said. Others chase headlines. Laughter from sycophantic guests followed. Zoya raised her glass, but the wine tasted sour. That night, as she and Ramesh posed beneath a banner that read Love Wins Again, Mehar was nowhere in sight, and yet, somehow, she was everywhere. The next morning, the world woke up to silence. Then, ATHUNDER, Women's Special Global Edition cover story. Asia's voice of resilience Mehar Khan and the Riverlight Foundation photographed at the edge of a turquoise coastline. Mehar stood poised in a deep navy pantsuit, her chin high, eyes calm, powerful without posing. The article didn't just highlight her best-selling memoir and recovery journey. It delved into the Riverlight Foundation, her NGO supporting survivors of domestic and corporate abuse. The piece credited Danish Aftab as the anonymous backer turned public advocate, making his first-ever philanthropic statement. Empowering one voice empowers hundreds more. I just gave her a microphone. The strength was always hers. Social media exploded. Hashtag MEHER Khan trended for 48 hours straight. Influencers reposted quotes from her speech at the UN. Mental health advocates praised her transparency. News anchors dissected her transition from socialite wife to activist icon, and then came the fallout. Buried deep in the Forbes article was a two-line mention. Riverlight's legal division is currently investigating several corporations tied to systemic silencing of whistleblowers, one of which reportedly includes Shabazz Global Holdings. Within hours, reporters began digging. Old NDA documents leaked. A former assistant of Ramesh posted anonymously about enforced silence and emotional coercion. A hashtag began to surface. Hashtag erase her era, and at the center of it all, Mehar remained. Silent. No press conference. No tweets. No gloating interviews. Just the echo of a woman who had once disappeared and now stood taller than those who tried to bury her. Back at their penthouse, Zoya threw a crystal vase across the room. She did this on purpose. Ramesh didn't. Answer. He stood staring at the magazine in his hands, unable to tear his gaze from the image of Mehar, poised, dignified, untouchable. His phone buzzed non-stop, investors requesting urgent meetings, board members asking for transparency, and media outlets demanding statements. He could spin a party. He couldn't spin the truth. For the first time, Ramiz understood. This wasn't a game, and he had just been checkmated, not by noise, but by quiet, undeniable power. Meher's silence had become the loudest statement of all. Nd. That was more powerful than any wish could ever be. The television screen in the Nairobi airport lounge played a flashy lifestyle segment on mute. Glittering text scrolled across the bottom. Power couple goals, Jumi's Shabazz and Zoya Imran launch luxury lifestyle brand in Paris. A montage followed Zoya modeling in fur-lined coats, Ramiz posing beside a private yacht, the two of them laughing in choreographed, over-polished slow motion. No one in the lounge paid much attention, except the intern, Ayana, fresh out of grad school and interning with the Riverlight Foundation, glanced at the screen, then over at the woman seated across from her. Meher Khan, dressed in a soft linen blouse and minimal makeup, looked peaceful. Calm. There was no press with her. No stylists. No entourage. Just a laptop, a notebook filled with handwritten ideas, and a hot cup of Kenyan chai. Ayana leaned forward, hesitant. Can I ask you something? Not work-related. Meher looked up and smiled. Of course. The intern nodded toward the screen. Do you ever wish things ended differently? Meher didn't glance at the screen. She didn't need to. Her answer came after a beat. Not bitter, not triumphant, just true.
They did end differently, she said gently.
I just stopped measuring my ending by someone else's story. Hours earlier, Meher had delivered the keynote address at the Pan-African Women's Wellness Summit in Nairobi, a gathering of health workers, activists, therapists, and educators working to improve mental health systems for women in underserved regions. Her talk wasn't dramatic or grandiose. It was quietly revolutionary. She spoke about emotional scars, societal silence, and the invisible labor women do to keep homes, hearts, and their sanity intact. She shared stories, not just hers, of women who survived emotional manipulation, gaslighting, abandonment, and rose. Anyway, you don't need permission to walk away from pain, she had said, looking out over hundreds of heads. You only need the courage to believe there's something better waiting. The applause lasted nearly 3 minutes, but Meher didn't linger in the limelight. She never did. Now, at the airstrip, a sleek private jet waited quietly under the setting sun. As Meher walked toward it, her long scarf fluttering in the breeze, the Nairobi skyline sparkled behind her. She paused once, not for drama, but to take it in the weight of where she had once been, and the grace of where she now stood. Inside the jet, Danish Aftab looked up from a tablet. He was sipping black coffee, casually reading The Atlantic, where an op-ed praised Meher's foundation as a model for global emotional wellness initiatives. Her name was everywhere, and yet she wore it like a whisper, not a shout. She stepped in. He smiled. How was the summit? Powerful, she replied, sinking into the seat across from him. He nodded. You look free. I feel it, she said softly. They exchanged no other words for a while. The engine whirred to life. The jet began taxiing. As it ascended, Meher glanced out the window below, just before they rose above the city skyline. Her eyes caught sight of a massive digital billboard. Ramiz and Zoya. The Power Couple collection. She saw Zoya in a sequin dress, flashing the diamond ring that once made headlines. Saw Ramiz's smirk, all rehearsed charm and hollow flash. Below them, luxury, desire, forever. She didn't laugh, didn't flinch. Instead, she touched the edge of the jet's window, felt the hum of forward movement, and whispered, he showed off the ring. I took off with my freedom. The world still talked about Ramiz Shabazz and his extravagant lifestyle. His PR team worked overtime. He and Zoya released matching fragrance lines, did podcast interviews, launched a wellness app they never used. But behind the sparkle, cracks formed. Several NGOs began scrutinizing Shabazz holdings for unethical labor practices. An expose hinted at financial sponsors backed out quietly. But no one from Mayhor's camp commented. She never tweeted a reaction, never gave an interview about her ex. Her silence was intentional. Her life was the statement. Weeks later, back at the Riverlight headquarters in Geneva, the staff gathered to celebrate their newest funding milestone, enough to open 5 new wellness centers across South Asia and Africa. During the toast, someone asked Mayher what kept her grounded through it all. The betrayal, the humiliation, the noise? She smiled and answered, I stopped trying to prove anything to anyone. I stopped needing closure from people who never gave me kindness, and I stopped waiting to be seen. I saw myself, and that was enough. Danish watched from across the room the man who never claimed her success, never competed with her light, never needed her to shrink. Later, as the two stood near the river outside the building, she slipped her hand into his. He didn't look surprised. He simply said, Welcome back. Meher looked at the sky. She had no ring to flaunt, no tabloid to fuel. But what? She had peace, purpose. Love without noise was worth more than anything Ramiz could ever buy.